In canon, we were explicitly shown that the clone troopers in the Empire were quickly phased out and officially decommissioned after the conclusion of the Clone Wars. The Kaminoan cloning process itself was not only getting expensive, but also unreliable now that the DNA of Jango Fett was having to be stretched extremely thin between clone troopers. This essentially made them a lot more dangerous, causing increase in behavioral abnormalities in their new troopers. The Emperor quietly dismissed the old batches. To stop this, Palpatine quietly dismissed the old troopers and ushered in the new with the fresh recruits from the Empire's own owned worlds, leaving clone veterans without any sort of job or provisions, thus relegating them to living directly on the street. However, in Legends continuity, the fate of many of these clone veterans was actually far worse than homelessness. The Empire seems to make a daily practice out of horrifying experiments which defy the laws of man, and the Dark Trooper Phase Zero project was one of the worst. Hello again, and welcome back to our archives. In today's Holocron, we are going to be talking about what may be the worst thing the Empire has done to the aging clone troopers, the final betrayal to those who had served them so faithfully. So now, let us begin with our tragic tale. Aging at twice the rate of an average human, the original clones were a rapidly vanishing force throughout the era known as the Dark Times. As they got older, they became less useful on the front lines of war. Though the clones of Jango Fett had years of hardened battle experience, their bodies were declining rapidly due to their growth hormones, the reality of their advanced aging, and what made things worse is that the Republic never truly stopped to consider how to stop this once the war was over. At that time, the only thing on the minds of the Republic leaders were the war with the Separatists. What happened to the clones under their service did not bother them whatsoever. But this was now a new problem that the Empire was facing. A large number of its veteran troopers are becoming less useful on the battlefield every passing day. But the Legends Empire was not about to let any resource go to waste, and certainly not one as experienced as the clone troopers were. And this was a sentiment that the clones themselves would echo. War and military was all that they knew, and the very few of them that were left were not comfortable with the idea of aging into irrelevancy while living out a normal civilian life. They wanted more war. They wanted more purpose. For many clone troopers, to retire was a fate worse than death, or so they thought. The lucky ones were regularly cycled out of the frontline units and reassigned to less volatile regions. Basically, posts that were more peaceful and less demanding on the clones' bodies, but places where they could at least feel they were useful. Besides, in these sorts of places, it didn't really matter if the soldiers there were top-notch or not. The most experienced of the clones, such as those who came from the first couple of batches and survived the entire Clone War, were used to train the new stormtrooper recruits. But a lot of these clones were unhappy being desk jockeys. They weren't taking their aging very well at all, and didn't like their own sedentary lifestyle. But a new problem began. The Empire was facing the fact that their troopers were not experienced, and in order to buff out their military, they turned more to number than their actual efficiency of the trooper. The Empire even introduced a completely brand new line of clone troopers, but this did not last very long at all. Their solution was a gruesome program. They wanted to keep the veterans of the Clone Wars in a final fight, and to their benefit, a lot of the aging desk clones were quick to sign up for something like this, something that would give them purpose again. But for the new project, the Empire desired a wealth of subjects to choose from, so from older clones that didn't willingly sign up, they were then taken against their will. All of the clones were brought back to a secret facility which doubled as a prison known as the Empirical, where the horrors would soon begin. The project was codenamed Dark Trooper Phase Zero. This would be the doom of the clone veterans. When we hear about the term Dark Trooper, we think nearly unstoppable battle droids. But before those units, the Dark Trooper project was originally meant to be a series of cyborg super soldiers. The prototypes were the Phase Zeros, clone troopers that the Empire promised to restore back to relevancy by using cybernetics. The idea being that these soldiers could benefit from their combat training and experience, while their cybernetic limbs remained in peak condition, thereby mitigating the effects of the clones' advanced aging process. However, what the clones didn't know is just how much of them was about to be replaced. Aboard the station, the clone veterans had their limbs and even their organs replaced with cybernetics, much of the same technology used to transform Anakin into Lord Vader, basically recreating the horrible incident on a mass scale. You can imagine the terror that the clones felt when they awoke and found themselves to be more machine than man. They had spent their lives fighting against a droid menace, only to now become like one. Many of them experimented against their will. Many Phase Zero Dark Troopers considered themselves to be abominations and would attempt to end their own lives rather than live as something less than human, like a droid. In some cases, the project replaced over 70% of the clone trooper's body with all mechanical parts. A vast majority of the Phase Zeros straight up went insane from the process. Yet despite these many drawbacks and the gruesome nature of the experiments, a significant number of the Phase Zeros made their way onto the battlefield successfully. They were undeniably effective and powerful. A clone is always focused when in war, and these Dark Troopers got to use their experience and their training, now combined with their superior physical skill of being a cyborg. They wreaked havoc across any of the front lines which they were deployed, becoming the most effective and powerful stormtrooper unit in the entire Empire. In terms of their armaments, they had blast cannons, arc casters, the casters being guns which produced an arcing electrical charge that melted organic beings from the inside out. When enemies stood too close together, the electrical charges would often spread out and arc between them, hitting multiple targets at once. Many of the Phase Zeros were also equipped with jump packs. This allowed them to jet into the enemy's ranks kamikaze style, laying waste to the opposition with their brutal weaponry. These troopers had little value for their own lives left, motivating them to make every single one of their attacks and plays against the enemy as deadly as possible. Because of their enhancements, many Phase Zeros believed that they could walk directly into enemy lines. However, it would be inaccurate to call this project a complete success. The troopers were all very unstable and reckless. While their veteran experience gave them a distinct edge, they still hated the Empire for what had happened, and their self-destructive tendencies had now made them dangerous to everyone around them. As time passed and the Empire increased its power, recruiting techniques made up for the gaps in the Stormtrooper Corps left by the aging clones. The Dark Trooper Phase Zero project declined and was soon eventually even shut down. The last of the Phase Zero troopers were allowed to peter out and would eventually be sent out to die in combat, with the last of them being killed shortly after the Battle of Yavin, who would be murdered by a lightsaber belonging to the clone of Galen Merrick. This is one of the worst things the Empire has ever done to a clone. Those troopers, whether they were killed by Jedi or not, deserve far more respect than what the Empire had given them. It's one thing for sure that many of the aging troopers that decided to sign up for this project to restore their bodies truly experienced a fate worse than death. But not only did the Empire downplay everything that they had done to them, they went so far as to kidnap other troopers and experiment on them against their will, dooming them to the same fate that Darth Vader underwent during his transformation. Interestingly, Vader was aware of this project, but he didn't really seem to care much about it. In his mind, if he learned to cope with his cybernetics and grow stronger from them, then the clones could too. I'd like to imagine that he'd feel more of a camaraderie with the Phase Zeros due to their similar situation. In the novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Vader mentioned that he feels at home with the troopers since they all wear masks as he does. It's a rare humanizing moment for Lord Vader. But in the book, it also says that Vader no longer trusts the troopers because of how easily they turned against the Jedi. In a weird way, Vader may also feel of what happened to the Phase Zeros was some kind of a cruel cosmic justice. To be honest, I feel like this could have been a cool concept for an arc in the Bad Batch. Since the Bad Batch plays out from the majority of the clones' perspective on a changing galaxy, it would have been awesome to get a story maybe from Cody's perspective of the aging troopers being offered a solution, only to get rug pulled out from under them. The Bad Batch themselves may have had to deal with this new powerful cyborg troopers, only to learn that they are all suffering from the immense physical and emotional agony put on them by the Empire. But anyway, friends, what are your thoughts on the Phase Zeros? Would you have wanted to have more of this be a plot point in the Bad Batch series? And if you've played through the original Battlefront, what did you think getting to play as a Dark Trooper? Let us know your thoughts on this lore in the comments down below, my friends, and as always, may the Force be with you.